Justice Minister Ronald Lamola is leading a team of representatives to a high-level conference on the humanitarian crisis in Palestine. The gathering, titled Call to Urgent Action, Urgent Humanitarian Response to Gaza, will be co-chaired by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres and Jordanian King Abdullah bin al-Hussein, among others. The Minister joins us now for more on that conversation. Minister, good evening and thank you very much for coming on this evening. Maybe let's start here. What does the rescue operation that took place this past weekend mean for this process that you are there trying to have a conversation on? One, as South Africa, do you welcome the rescue? Two, what does it mean for the hostages that are still being held? Is this an indication that the rest of the rescue is going to be done through this military operation? What does it mean for the Palestinian prisoners that have not been released? And will it have any impact on the talks? I know that's a mouthful, but let's see if we can get through it.
Good evening, and good evening to the viewers at home. As you are aware, since the ruling of the ICJ, South Africa, we have been very clear that both parties in the conflict have to play their part in terms of releasing hostages from both sides, and that the best way to resolve the conflict is an engagement and engagement to resolve this challenge. With regards to the conference, indeed, it's a high-level conference on humanitarian aid to enable the UN agencies, UNRWA, the relief agency, to be able to provide sustained and unimpeded humanitarian assistance to the people of the Gaza Strip, in line with the UN resolutions of the Security Council that has said so, that there should be a sustained humanitarian help. And also, as you are aware, the ICJ ruling stated the same, including the fact that any humanitarian aid should be obviously accompanied by a ceasefire, that there will be no humanitarian aid without a ceasefire. So this conference is looking at all the modalities, the risks, and the mitigating factors that will enable humanitarian aid to be done without any hindrance.
So the military action that rescued 4 Palestinian authorities are saying could have killed close to 250 to 300 people. Do you think this is going to impact on those talks that could lead to a ceasefire that would allow the humanitarian aid to gain access?
Yeah, everything happening in the Gaza Strip impacts into all the processes of international efforts to bring peace to the area and also to provide humanitarian assistance. So all issues will be engaged in the conference tomorrow, and there are various working streams looking at all the strategies that must enable humanitarian aid to be allowed to enter through the sea, through air, and on land. So all the means of transport that can enable humanitarian aid are being looked into, and this is supported by a number of countries that will be attending the conference, including the president of Egypt and other heads of state that will be in attendance, including other UN agencies and diplomats that will be attending here, because Jordan has always been leading humanitarian effort to provide aid. As you'll be aware, the king himself has flown a plane to drop off humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip, and Jordan has been doing that to do what is called the drop-off of food through air, and they continue to do that. So they have been leading, and they are very close to this area. So they are well located to lead this humanitarian effort in line with the UN and also working with the UN agency.
As South Africa, what is your view on the US-backed ceasefire proposal?
Yeah, as you are aware, we have always said that any process must take into account the ICJ ruling with regards to the ceasefire, that it must look into both sides of the conflict and ensure that whatever efforts to the ceasefire ensures that both sides to the conflict, as I've said earlier, as I started, they comply with the court order, they comply also with the with peace mission effort, release of hostages from both sides, sitting on the table to resolve the challenges. So we believe that that should be the context.
Well, there are those who say this particular ceasefire proposal is not going to work because it doesn't commit any of the parties as to what happens after that. There is no plan. Maybe there is a plan on the side of Hamas, but certainly there is no plan presented on the part of Israel as to what happens post the ceasefire or even post the war.
Yeah, hence I said that our context is very clear, that everything must be underlined by what the court has said so that there should be respect of that. So what should then happen is that there must be a humanitarian aid, and that's why this conference is to look into how do we then ensure that nations of the world help provide the humanitarian aid and assistance to the people of the Gaza Strip. And that can only happen, as you are aware, the court has said, when there is a ceasefire. So for humanitarian aid to happen unhindered, as you may be aware, there's a number of UNRWA or United Nations Relief Agency staff that have been killed, about 180 of them. So that's why there is a need for this ceasefire, and there is a need for all parties to buy into this program that must enable humanitarian aid.
So part of the tactic or the strategy of going to the ICJ was also, in a sense, to amplify the call that you're making, that you're repeating again this evening, but also to get the global community to also come on board and join you in this call. There have been some major resignations that have been announced in the Israeli cabinet. Do you think that global pressure or international pressure is beginning to mount and take shape?
Yeah, indeed, it is bearing fruit. As you may also be aware, there's a number of countries that have also joined the case in the UN, but there's also a number of countries also in the United Nations platforms that are continuing to call for a ceasefire, for the parties to negotiate a peaceful process. And this also includes the friends of Israel itself. So indeed, there is a change in the global community. We just hope that this change will also reach Mr. Netanyahu himself, who seems to be intransigent. But we do believe that with more efforts, with more pressure, even Netanyahu himself will end up relenting and understanding the same context that the global community is trying to put to bear for the state of Israel to be part of a peaceful process that will enable peace in the Gaza Strip and allow for a two-state solution as determined by resolutions of the United Nations.
Reports of the United States having a unilateral conversation with Hamas to strike a deal to free Americans. Do you have any view on that?
Yeah, as we have said, is that all the processes in the Gaza Strip, as it is pertaining now, should take into account the ICJ court ruling. It should also take into account all parties. There must be release of hostages by Hamas. There must be release of hostages by the state of Israel. So all those, as long as it is part of any initiative, we believe it will go a long way in resolving the conflict.
And finally, are you worried about a Donald Trump administration? There are U.S. elections, and whether or not that could set back the efforts that you have been putting, at least in the last 9 months even?
Yeah, as you are aware, we also had our own elections. We believe that it is up to the citizens of the United States to elect a president of their choice. We will continue to engage with whoever is in administration in the United States, as we expect them to engage with whoever is a leader of government in the Republic of South Africa, with no interference from any country.
The ANC losing a 40% majority, 50% majority, I beg your pardon, now sitting at 40%. Do you think that affects your standing in the international community as far as the voice of this particular matter is concerned? The kind of respect you would have been able to command and where you're sitting now?
No, we don't think so at all, because as you are aware, the Genocide Convention has been domesticated in our law. No one can come in and withdraw that law. It's already there. And our parliament also resolved on these issues related to Israel. So the South African body politic is very clear on the issues of human rights, protection of civilian infrastructure, and the children of Gaza. So I do not foresee any changes in that regard. So I also think that after the elections of the president and the appointment of the executive, they will continue with what is already in the law, and which we have acted upon in line with our international obligations, in line with the convention, which were guided by our own domesticated genocide convention that has been domesticated in our own parliament.
So to put it a little bit simpler, are you saying even with the government of national unity, you do not see that particular position changing? You do not see in a government of national unity with the Democratic Alliance, for example, your stance on the Israel-Palestine issue changing?
Yes, the government of national unity, as you'll remember, the ANC that is going to engage with everyone. So irrespective of whoever will end up in that government of national unity, our participation on this case is informed by our own domestic laws. It's not like ourselves as the cabinet of South Africa, we acted out of our own volition. We were informed by our law. The Genocide Convention has been domesticated by our parliament. It's in line with our statutes, it's in line with our law. We acted in that regard. We had an obligation to act in line with the South African law. So I don't foresee any changes in that regard, because the law is there. It must be implemented or acted upon.
Now, in the various times that you have been at the ICJ, I mean, most of the commentators would have looked at the situation at the ICJ and say, the court has got no way of enforcing even that ruling, right? And hence Israel has been ignoring whatever ruling that keeps coming out of that court. What do you think is going to be the impact of this conference? I mean, Israel can just simply, it seems, even ignore whatever resolutions you're going to reach in that conference on humanitarian aid.
Yeah, all courts across the globe don't have any means of enforcing their ruling, but it's on the conscience of societies and also on the executive to ensure that there is implementation. In line with international law, it is in the body of the UN structures and also the collective conscience of the global community to put the necessary pressure on the state that has been ordered by a court to act on it and to ensure that that state respects the international law. So we continue to put that necessary pressure, and the global community is continuing to do so. I believe that even the conference will continue to play that role, and even its resolutions will have to be respected by the state of Israel or both parties, if needs be, because the global community, all of us are putting hands together. It is the UN conference chaired by the two heads of states of Egypt and also of Jordan, plus the Secretary General of the United Nations. So this also sends a very strong message, and there could be other heads of state that will be here, but many countries will also be represented. So it's clear that the voice of the world, the collective voice of the global community, wants to allow for humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip.
Minister, we appreciate your time. We wish you all the best in your conference, and thank you very much for coming on this evening.